Hello and welcome. Today we're going to catch up on all the books I read in 2024 that I haven't yet reviewed. We're going to go from worst to best, and as always, I would love to hear your thoughts and recommendations. Before we start, because this is my end of the year wrap up, I am going to go through my Goodreads stats and my Storygraph stats. Okay, so just very quickly, I read 65 books in 2024, of which 17 were fanfics, just for transparency. My average book length was 460 pages, and my average rating for 2024 was 3.6, which honestly I don't think is that bad. Now, according to Storygraph, the genres I spent the most time reading were fantasy, romance, young adult, literary, and classics. No surprise there. And my most read authors were Brandon Sanderson, Holly Black, and V.E. Schwab. Anyway, now that that is out of the way, I have to say that this year I DNF'd 2 books. Icebreaker and When the Moon Hatched. And in hindsight, I also should have DNF'd Fourth Wing and Powerless, but I pushed through those 2 just out of sheer stubbornness and stupidity. Now with Icebreaker, I honestly did not expect it to have so much corn. I picked up this book expecting to get like a cute romance, and that was it, with maybe some spice. No, I did not get any of that. I got lots of corn and lots of very annoying and self-centered characters. And this book solidified that I really don't have the patience for contemporary romance. Also, how many corn scenes are in this book? Okay, wait, what about... Great, I opened the book to count how many corn scenes were within the first 152 pages, and the first sentence I read was, are you listening to this? Okay. Can Lola really hear my balls? I shall count them for you now. I know this is wasting my battery, but I shall count them for you now, okay? Okay, 150 pages, 4 corn scenes. I rest my case. Next up, we have Apprentice to the Villain, which is the second part to Assistant to the Villain. For those of you who don't know what this is about, it's pretty much the grumpy, mysterious, hot villain, who's not really a villain, that's besides the point, and he's very bubbly, sunshiny, happy assistant who's trying to navigate everything. That's it. It's a romantasy. It started off as TikTok videos, and then the author got a book deal, I guess. The first book I really enjoyed because it was very fun. It wasn't taking itself seriously. It was just a very chill, relaxing read. But then this one started taking itself way too seriously. This is not a series you actually read for the plot and the world building. You can tell from the get-go when you open book 1 that that's not what's going to be keeping you reading. The second book tried to really do more than it actually can. We got a lot more side character POVs, we got a lot more world building and plot, and we got, I would say, pretty much none of what made book 1 entertaining, which was honestly quite a disappointment. I do also have to nitpick the font, because it's so flipping tiny. Like, come on, wait. Just an example. Hopefully the focus. I mean, whatever. I don't want to spoil, but let's just do the first chapter. Like, can you see? It is in focus, I hope it is, but it's just tiny, and it makes it very uncomfortable to read. But that's maybe just me nitpicking. So from chapter 1, we dived straight into the plot with no recap, and I was struggling to remember who was who and how we ended up in that situation. And it was really trying to build suspense in the beginning that honestly there was no point of the suspense being there. Now, in a very dumb moment, I did have to Google, do frogs have teeth? The answer is yes. I also think that this part of the book The first 22 chapters were pretty much skippable, and we could have just started from chapter 23, and we really wouldn't have lost anything. Will I read the third book? Yes. But I have pretty much no expectations at this point. I hope that it will kind of go back into the direction it was going in book 1, but we shall see. 2 out of 5. Focus on me. Focus on. Why do I keep losing focus? Focus. Hello, camera. Thank you. You know, filming from a distance is kind of hard because I can't manually control the focus and I have to depend on the autofocus, but it does betray me. Anyway, next up we have We by Evgeny Zamyatin. This book is actually the inspiration for Orwell's 1984. So I was really curious to kind of maybe not compare, but just see what bits of this book inspired him and how they affected his writing. The story behind the author is kind of sad because he was pretty much just chased out of Russia. So in 1921, this book became the first book to actually be censored in the Soviet Union. And Sneaky Zamyatin arranged for it to be smuggled to the West and published there, which of course really pissed off the Soviet Union, and he got blacklisted, which then resulted in him requesting permission from Stalin to leave Russia. And then, unfortunately, he died in poverty in Paris. So from what I've told you, you probably can guess that this is a dystopian book that is highly critical of a certain type of political regime. Thinking about it, I probably should have read this in Bulgarian, because Bulgarian is kind of close to Russian, so I assume the translation would be just a little bit better, because there are some concepts and expressions that are, you know, more difficult to translate when there's such a big difference between languages, the way it is between Russian and English. Now, contrary to 1984, which was very heavy and serious, this did read kind of like a comedy/romance that painted a caricature of a dystopian world. And this was a very slow read because the way it was written was very fragmented. There were lots of incomplete sentences and diary record fragments that you kind of had to piece together, and the descriptions of people were kind of confusing because there were numbers and then just weird physical traits. And a lot of things were left unsaid, which just kind of broke the storytelling for me and just took me out of the story. And also, as I was reading this, I was making a lot more connections to the movie Equilibrium than I did to 1984. I did find the story interesting and I wanted to see what was going to happen, but I feel like the stylistic choice didn't really do justice to the story itself and what it was trying to say. Also, I do have to complain about all of the maths. I don't do numbers. I can't do numbers. I see numbers, I run away. There was so much math. I mean, not that much math, but there were like references and stuff, and I was like, oh no. Anyway, there is this very good Goodreads review that I laughed a lot at, so I'm just going to briefly read it to you so you kind of get the picture of what I mean about the way he describes people. My biggest problem with the writing was how Zamyatin describes his character. He doesn't go overboard with details, he instead chooses one small, insignificant, and often ugly detail to constantly refer to people as. The only details described about women, for example, seem to be their mouths. Zamyatin even addresses this on page 71 with, "All women are lips, nothing but lips." He'll take someone's round pink lips and this will become their new name. Round pink lips, round pink lips, round pink lips, non-stop. The rhetorical device of referring to an entity by only one small detail of it is called metonymy? How do you pronounce that in English? Because I know in Bulgarian it's metonym. Metonym. Man, I don't even know how to pronounce in Bulgarian. 10 out of 10 for language skills. Anyway.
Metonym.
So the rhetorical device is metonym, which is only a couple consonants away from monotony. Another character, who is supposedly to be the attractive love interest, is described as having sharp teeth incessantly. Twice, the narrator takes his time to describe how her eyebrows and mouth wrinkles form a giant X on her face. And then there's a funny illustration that the person has posted, and this is it. This is pretty much the main issue I have with the book. Okay, so we gets a 3 out of 5. Next up, we have Circe, which is basically a retelling of Greek mythology. And I went into it expecting a relaxing read because a friend of mine from the book club recommended it because she read it during her beach holiday and she said it was really enjoyable. However, I found it slow, depressing, and surprisingly, I needed a trigger warning for a certain scene, and I'm not really a type of person who needs trigger warnings. I also think I'm not really a person for myth retellings, because if I know the characters and generally the plot and where the story is going, I kind of lose interest, which is kind of weird because I have no problem with spoilers. Sometimes I actively go and look for spoilers and they don't affect my reading at all. So maybe it's not about me knowing where the story is going, but more about just the way it's written. I don't know, I didn't really enjoy Circe a lot. Honestly though, it's been some time since I read it and I don't remember enough to give like a proper critique, I would say, other than just, saying that I didn't enjoy it and that I didn't really feel anything while reading this, aside from just wanting it to end. So I'm going to end the review here and it gets a 3 out of 5. Next up, we have Rewitched, which I will not lie, I will be fully honest with you, I bought because of the dyed edges. That is it. That is the reason I bought it. There's a cat on it, okay? Sometimes I am allowed to choose a book based on the cover. In this case, based on the pages. This is my first purchase of its kind. It is what it is. What was the story about? Oh no, this does not speak well for my ability to choose a book based on its pages. But it's so pretty. Come on. Anyway, moving on. Yes, okay, I remember now. So basically, we have a witch that is turning 30. She doesn't really use her magic a lot, but she finds out that now that she is about to be 30, she is supposed to face the coven, and the coven will decide if she will keep her magic or not. Our main character also works at a bookstore and she loves books, and that's about it. It's a story about self-discovery, or more like rediscovery. There is some romance in it, and that's it. It's the vibes. You just read it for the vibes, pretty much. You should not go into this expecting a balanced magical system or a very logical plot, because it was honestly rather illogical. The romance was just tropes, and I honestly didn't care about it at all. It kind of feels like the author adjusted the plot, so there could be possibly a second book, and it felt kind of forced. The writing style was fine, a little bit jumpy and a little bit too simple, but it was fine. And overall, it was an enjoyable read. It's something you just read to relax. So Rewitched gets a 3 out of 5. And if there is a second book, I'm probably not going to read it, unless it looks kind of like this again, so I'm allowed to be weak sometimes, yeah? I have changed the setup because the autofocus was just not working, and I need to be close to the manual focus, okay? So I am now on the table. Anyway, we're moving on to Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. This is an anti-war book. I know a lot of people say that it's supposed to be funny, it's supposed to be kind of a satire, because it's supposed to paint war in a very ridiculous way. because in a way war is absolutely ridiculous. But I honestly found this book profoundly sad. I felt so sad reading this. It's centered around the journey of Billy Pilgrim, I think that was his name, yes, who was sent to fight in World War II. And he ends up being in Dresden during the bombings. Billy has severe mental health issues. And the way the story is told is that we're jumping back in time constantly from one period of Billy's life to another period of Billy's life. In the beginning of the book, we get Kurt Vonnegut talking about his own experience in the war a little bit and how he wrote this book. And throughout the book, we do also get like little inserts of Kurt Vonnegut himself because he was there during the bombing of Dresden. Right? He would say that something happened to someone and then he would say, that was me. And I found those bits the most interesting because they really did feel personal. Now, I understand why the book was so choppy and so random, but I don't really enjoy that type of narrative style. I mean, it depends. It depends on the way it's done. I'd say the biggest problem was maybe there was too much random detail of stuff that for me didn't add anything to the story, and maybe I wouldn't have had a problem with the choppiness if those details weren't included. Maybe. Slaughterhouse-Five gets a 4 out of 5. Next we have How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories, which I don't have a physical copy of because I borrowed my friend's. I loved it. Honestly, it was great to read right before we went to bed because it did feel like a storybook, especially like a children's bedtime storybook. The art in the book was beautiful and I loved just learning a little bit more about Cardan as a character. I don't really have a lot to say about this book, but I thoroughly enjoyed it and it gets a 4 out of 5. And now we have The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is not a spoiler. The book begins with a murder. And then the whole book is the journey to the murder and then what happens after the murder. And it follows 5 or 6? 6 characters. It's told from one of the characters' POV specifically. And first of all, the writing style I found beautiful. This is a type of writing style I really enjoy. It is flowery, but not in a pretentious way, I would say. It definitely didn't feel pretentious to me. Maybe because of the subject area that the book covers, which is, academic elitism. To some people, it might feel like it's pretentious. I didn't get that vibe. I also kind of felt a different type of connection to the characters, maybe, okay, this is going to sound a little bit cringe maybe, but the main characters here, they are studying ancient Greek. I studied ancient Greek as well, okay? At uni. Okay, so for 2 years, I tried to go to a Bulgarian uni, and I did a cultural studies degree. I ended up hating it and dropping out and moving to the UK and blah blah blah, long story. But for 1 term, I did ancient Greek and I remember how much I loved it. Now, I did also do it around the time when I started realizing that my degree was a waste of time and I didn't want to do it anymore. But when I was doing my ancient Greek studies, we were, I think, 3 or 4 people in the class. We were a very, very small class, so it felt very intimate. The teacher was really good. She was a lovely lady. It turned out she actually used to be a friend of my aunt's, so we also had that in common. And the classroom was right at the top of the university. And to get there, you had to go through like these tiny, cramped, dark corridors way above, with a beautiful view of the city. And in Bulgarian they call it Golobarnica. How is that in English? Pigeon.
Dovecote.
Dovecote? What? That's a new word. So, it was located in what people called
Dovecote.
And once you enter the classroom, it was just filled with wood and books and the smell of old books, and you had this very old academic vibe that just kind of inspired you, you know, and it made you feel very good. Like, it was really romanticized, and I loved it, okay? I loved it for the experience itself. And then you're in that room, and then you're studying ancient Greek. Okay, you get the point. Now, do I remember anything from my ancient Greek? No. Did I just randomly at one point just stop going to classes because I no longer wanted to do the degree? Yes, but that is besides the point, okay? I just love the vibes because it reminds me of that period of time. Yeah. Now, it is a bit slow. We get to the actual murder a little bit after halfway through, but, okay, I really enjoyed it. So, The Secret History gets a 4 out of 5. Next up, we have Fairy Tale by Stephen King, which is actually the first Stephen King book I've read. Why do I feel like I've talked about this before? Have I? Have I not? I don't remember. Anyway, if I have, I'm talking about it again. I believe that this is how we write a fantasy book from a first-person perspective. If you have watched some of my previous book reviews, you might remember, now that I'm saying this, that I really don't like books from the first-person POV, especially if they're fantasy books, okay? Now, we are ignoring the fact that most of the books I just went through are from the first person. They just are, unfortunately. I still managed to enjoy some of them, but they're not fantasy, yeah? Yeah, they're not. Fairy Tale is a fantasy book. I know it's also supposed to be a horror fantasy. Nothing really horror-y happened if you ask me. But yeah, the way the book is written, the way the chapters are written, it just made me keep going. You know, we just want to read another one and another one and another one. And I very rarely feel that way about books. Now, I do have some issues with this one. The story itself, I didn't enjoy as much, especially the last maybe 300 pages or so, maybe 200 pages or so. I'm not really into the whole chosen one idea and stuff. Funny for me to say when The Wheel of Time is my favorite book, but I'm not really into the whole chosen one vibes in general. There are some bits I question, but I can't get into them without spoiling, and I'm trying very hard not to spoil anything. Did not give you a summary. Okay, basically it's about a boy that helps an old man, takes care of him and his dog. Old man dies, leaves him his house, and it ends up that on his property there's a portal to another world, and then the boy travels to the other world, and the story goes on. That's it. I do believe it's worth the read if you are in very well executed character development, a fast-paced story, an interesting world, and that's it. 4 out of 5. Now we are talking. Now we are at Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, which is book number 2 of the Stormlight Archive. A thick boy, once again. Same complaint about the size because it's way too big to hold. Publishers, please fix this issue. Anyway, I'm going to stop commenting on this at some point. Probably when I'm actually done with reading all of the Stormlight. At this point, I have read the 3rd book as well, and I am currently reading the 4th book. And with that said, I can definitely say that the 1st and the 2nd are my favorite of the series so far. I have only one criticism, although maybe it's not really a criticism, maybe it is. It's just a question, but it's spoiler related and I will not be spoiling stuff. But aside from that, I have 2 things to say. I love pattern and Jasna is an icon. 5 out of 5. Then we have Edgedancer, which is the novella between book number 2 and book number 3. As I was reading this, I had to keep reminding myself that Lift is a child. She also kind of reminds me of Pippi Longstocking. I liked it. I didn't really connect to it as much, didn't enjoy it as much. I kind of wanted it to be over quickly, possibly because a full book of Lift is a little bit too much for me. 4 out of 5. Alloy of Law. Another Brandon Sanderson book, as you can tell. This is the first Mistborn novel from the 2nd arc of Mistborn. Loved it. absolutely loved it, read it as part of a book club, because I have successfully managed to get my best friend into the Cosmere and into Mistborn and into Stormlight now. So a great success. If you haven't read Mistborn, read it. If you haven't read Mistborn and you like high fantasy and world building and magic systems, but like complex and well developed ones, and a writing style that gets straight to the point, and characters you can connect to, just read Mistborn. Yeah, maybe read Mistborn first and then go into Stormlight, because Stormlight is a very, very thick boy. But Mistborn, I believe, is a masterpiece. I actually think it's better than Stormlight. Haha. But yeah, Alloy of Law, you get completely new characters because it's Arc 2 and the action takes place 150, something like that, years after Arc 1. Really fun to read. This is not the serious Mistborn story that the first arc is. This is just fun. 5 out of 5. And we are ending with, this might be a surprise, but we're ending with Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, which is the second book of the Emily Wilde series. And I adore this series, okay? I reviewed the first one in my beach holiday video, and I don't really have a lot to say that's different from what I said in the first one. I can't even say if I like the first one or the second more. Maybe I did like the first one more, because that's just generally how it is with series. Beautiful writing style, okay? This is the type of writing style I really enjoy. Again, flowery but not pretentious. It definitely is very successful at creating a whimsical, magical world. It has great world building, if you ask me, especially because of all of the little footnotes at the end of some pages, because our main character, the one telling the story, is a scientist. So she writes footnotes in her diary because the story is told as her diary entries, but then you get like these little footnotes with like fairy science stuff. It's adorable. I love it. It really adds to the character building. Also, I don't know if I want to be Wendell Bumblebee or just have a Wendell Bumblebee in my life, but he is also an amazing character. Emily Wilde gets another 5 out of 5, and I am really looking forward to the next book. And I am going to miss this series when it ends, because it's such a relaxing read. But anyway, that is all I have for you for today. Thank you for watching. I am running out of battery, so I'm going to try to wrap this up very quickly. Any recommendations for books are welcome. I would love to hear your thoughts on some of the books I've read if you have read them as well. And again, thank you so much for watching. I am trying to move this channel more into the booktube side of YouTube rather than just studying in Japanese and whatever. So if you're into that, then subscribe. I'm not good at asking people to subscribe and like and whatever, so you do whatever you want to do. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.